Leverage. Why is it so sexy? And why do you want it working on your assets? And why investment property is the coolest asset class for you to be applying leverage in your wealth feast so that you can accelerate your time to freedom. Now, the best way to explain this to you is by using an example. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in this video. I'm Ann Wilson, the Wealth Chef, and in today's video, we're going to be exploring investment property and how to use this powerful wealth accelerating force called leverage to really get you to your financial freedom so much quicker. So let's dive right in. Let's say an example, you've got $100,000 to invest, and you go, yoo-hoo, I'm going to go into investment property. Remember, this isn't your home. Your home is not an asset. This is some form of investment property, residential, retail, industrial, commercial, where you rent out the property and somebody pays you for the use of that property, and this is how you get income flowing in, but also the property increases in value through this thing called capital growth. So, first scenario, you've got $100,000 to invest, and you go and you find a, let's call it a 2-bedroom property for $100,000, and you can get that property. And currently in the market, the average growth, the annual growth on growth of the property market is 5%. And the yield, so yield is the income, the rental that you get from that property as a percentage of the value of the property is 3%. These are the assumptions we're using in this scenario. Don't get too caught up in, oh, that's not what it is in my country, Anne. The key is that you understand the principle of leverage, because that's what we're focusing on here. So there you go. You go and you spend that full $100,000 and you buy that property, you get some tenants in, and you earn $3,000 a year in rental. We're going to be working in per annum numbers because that's how we do our numbers. Remember, everything is annualized. You're going to earn $3,000 in a year from the rent from that property as 3% of the $100,000. But each year, so in year one, the property's value is going to grow by 5% because that's the growth rate. So at the end of year one, you've got your $100,000 property. It's going to give you $5,000 in growth plus $3,000 in income. That's from the rent. So it's a total of $8,000 that property has earned you in a year. That adds to your asset pot. Now, at the moment, if you're growing your assets, you're going to just be reinvesting that, or you're going to be feasting off it. But the principle is here that $100,000 in the investment property has earned you $8,000 a year, and then each year that would continue to do that. So that, if you're wanting to work out what is my rate of return, how hard is my money working for me, you work out 8,000 divided by the 100,000 you've got invested, and that is an 8% rate of return. Not too shabby. Year on year, you could be feasting off that. That could be a reasonable, wealth feast for you to go. Not too bad. Now, in this case, you bought that property with that $100,000 right out. There is no mortgage. There's no loan on this. So now let's look at a different scenario. You've got that same $100,000. You've found this property that meets these criteria, which will give you a 3% yield in terms of your rental for that $100,000. But in this case, you go, you know what? I'm going to get smart. I'm going to use leverage, and in this case, that good debt, that leveraged expansion debt that we speak about in that other video. And you're going to go, you know what? I'm going to go and use other people's money to make me rich. And you're going to go to a bank, and you're going to aim, in this scenario, we're going to say a 70% loan to value ratio. That's what we're starting to talk about in leverage. What does that mean? A loan to value ratio means you're going to borrow 70% of the value of the property. So what that means is you only have to come up with 30% of the property. So for your $100,000, you can actually then buy 3 properties because you've actually only have to put $30,000 into each, which lets you buy 3 and have $10,000 in change for other bits and pieces. The rest of the money has been borrowed from the bank. And absolutely, that money's got a cost. And that cost is called interest, because the money lends you the bank and you pay the bank for the benefit of that. It doesn't necessarily even need to be the bank. It could be other investors. There's all sorts of ways that you can get that seed money, that capital, to start expanding the assets in your asset drawer. So you still might say, well, Anne, what's so sexy about this, Anne? All I've ended up with is 3 properties and I own the bank a whole lot of money. Well, let me show you. So each year, your property is still got these same criteria. You're going to be getting that 5% growth. So let's just look at one property at a time. You got your $5,000 that have come in from that 5% growth. Now, in terms of the income side of the equation, you're still going to have that $3,000 income, but you've borrowed this money. You've got to pay the bank back. And we're assuming in this case a 3% interest rate. Because the key criteria is you always want to make sure that your investment property, here's a little seriously wealthy tip for your investment property. When you run your numbers, you never want to touch an investment property where your net yield before interest is lower than the cost of borrowing. So in this case, we're just assuming that it's equal, the cost of borrowing. Your net yield and your interest rate is the same. That's always your buying criteria. So in that case, this interest is going to cost you $2,100 a year. That is 3% of the $70,000 you've borrowed for each property. You know, I know I'm doing numbers, but really that's as complicated as it gets. To be a great Welsh chef and great with numbers, that's about as complicated you need for maths. That's all it is. Basic multiplication and being able to subtract and add. So you're going to have your 3,000 minus that 2,100, which leaves you with 800. So in total, per property, you're going to get 5,800 a year in growth, made up of capital growth and income coming in into your asset pot. And you go, well, Anne, I'm getting less and I'm getting that side because I'm paying the interest. Well, actually, you're not. Because remember, what is your money in the deal? You've only put 30,000 in to each property. You haven't put 100,000 in this case. So what is your growth rate? What is your rate of return? This is that rate of return, remember, is how hard is your money working for you? And that's what you want to be increasing, because the harder your money works for you, the faster you get to freedom. So in this case, 5,800 divided by 30, because that's the real money in the deal, not the 100,000. That's just come from the bank. But you get the full benefit of the growth on the 100,000 is actually 19.3% is now the growth rate in this scenario. That is what leverage does for you, because you get all of the growth on the full asset, but only having to actually put money in for a percentage of it. So you control an asset for a smaller amount of money, and that is what leverage is all about. So with just that simple strategy of putting less money in, you have more than doubled your growth rate. For each of those 30,000 slices, because you've used leverage, you now have 3 assets working for you at this rate of return, bringing you that money. So you get more coming in, more growth as a result of somebody else's money, the banks or your investors or kind. But even better, you reduce your risk. And this is what is so key. So why is your risk significantly reduced as a result of borrowing, as a result of going into debt? Because you've now got 3 properties for the same amount of money. In this case, you've got your proverbial eggs all in one basket. You've only got 1 property. So if for some reason you can't rent that property out, there's a void, tenants default, you need to do renovations, boom, the cash flow stops. But that asset's not working for you. But in this scenario, because you've got 3, if 1 property's got a void on it, or you're needing to do a renovation, no worries, because the 2 other properties are still cash flowing. They're still working for you. So that volatility is spread out. Your risk is spread. Because this is ultimately what your financial well-being is all about. It's about letting money support you and serve you, feed you, bring you that income, but also give you that confidence of security that you've got this financial base base sorted and all these assets working really hard for you. So there you go, Leverage 101 and why it's so sexy and so great for accelerating your wealth feast. So if you've been watching this video anywhere over than at thewealthchef.com, head on over there. And then under the video, I'd love to know your comments, your thoughts, your questions on leverage. Let me know whether you're already using it. What are your thoughts about borrowing to accelerate? And is this just one of these eureka moments where you go, oh, now I get for my investment property why I'm not necessarily going to be paying down that mortgage, and I want to keep my investment property leveraged and those mortgages up while I'm growing my wealth feast, versus your own personal home, if you own it, why you want to be paying that off. Because remember, that is neutral debt, whether this is expansion debt. And you can see how by just doubling your rate of return with no extra money from you, no extra time, this is about the power of knowledge. So get out there and live that rich, juicy life. And while you're at it, subscribe to this channel if you haven't done it yet. And we'll see you in the next episode.